as Susan said, it's a question that we all knew had to be asked. We were all waiting for it to be asked again to see if he would finally deny it. Just a surreal moment that really does make Watergate look like a third-rate burglary.
Well, it's also a question, remember, we learned this week, the FBI was interested in. They needed to look into whether or not the President of the United States was an asset, John, of Russia. Again, there's a body of evidence behind that question that Kristen Welker asked, and we can now add the question of whether or not he asked to have the United States pull out of NATO because he didn't get it, he didn't understand it, they're not paying enough money. There are enough one-offs that they're not one-offs, that it's a body of evidence.
Yeah, and well, I mean, yes. I mean, again, it's all suggestive, and none of it is conclusive proofs. But we're human beings, right? We are designed to recognize patterns, and the pattern here is pretty powerful, and raises such profound questions that, you know, if anybody who had some fundamental question about whether the Mueller investigation should exist, even if there was nothing that happened in the campaign, even if the obstruction of justice claims weren't there, even if you hadn't fired Jim Comey, if you just looked at the pattern of behavior towards Russia over the last 2 years, you would be sitting here going, what is going on with Donald Trump and Russia? And that alone, now forget about the pre-presidency and some of the other behaviors, which all should be investigated, that alone would make him, would put him outside the American mainstream in terms of how they view Russia, from conservative to liberal, over the whole modern history of the country, and you would have to ask the question, why?
Wildly outside the mainstream, Rick Tyler, outside the mainstream of traditional Republican thought, traditional Democratic thought, traditional independent thought, traditional thought in Western civilization. So my question is, where the hell are the Republicans? Why aren't Republicans? Why is I not to hit too close to home, but Ted Cruz has an opinion on everything. Where is Ted Cruz? Where is Mitch McConnell? Where is Lindsey Graham? Where are these Republican senators? Where is the majority leader of the House? The man that Donald Trump called Steve. Where are these leaders to say, NATO, no. Mr. President, you were terribly confused if you think the United States should get out of NATO. You're terribly confused if you think that Vladimir Putin is a strong leader that we should emulate. I mean, there's always silence from my former party that should know better.
It's really hard to explain, Joe, that you and I would be sitting here, you as a former Republican, I as notionally a Republican, that the Republican Party would become the pro-Russia party, and our party would continue to defend Vladimir Putin. But I think what we need to remember is the Mueller investigation is actually very vulnerable for a couple reasons. One, we don't know which Bill Barr is going to show up as Attorney General, right? And that's what the committee has got to find out. They got to find out, does the Bill Barr who show up as the guy who wrote the op-ed and saying that, you know, the president has extraordinary executive powers, which he does, and therefore he can't be indicted, which is precisely what Nixon had said, the president, by definition, can't break the law. You also have a circular reference because the president does define what is and what is not a national security problem, but it looks like he may be the national security problem. And reflecting Nixon, the American people have a right to know if their president is an asset of Russia, or at a minimum, whether he has a conflict. And the only body that can do that is Congress. The executive branch could do it, but it's vulnerable to do it, and the Congress has got to get to the bottom of what the conflict that President Trump has with Russia.
They have to know by now. They have to know by now this is going to end badly. I talked to a lot of conservatives yesterday, and they all said the same thing. This ends badly. They know it by now. Don't they want to get out front and criticize a president who is acting like he's an asset of Vladimir Putin, an ex-KGB agent, and Russia, by denigrating, oh my gosh, the free press, by denigrating the intel communities, by denigrating the rule of law, by denigrating NATO, by denigrating our closest allies over the past 50, 60 years? Don't they want to get ahead of that? This ends badly for them. They know it.
I mean, you're pointing to the thing that I think is the biggest problem, is that the undermining of our institutions is the biggest problem. When the American people don't believe in our institutions anymore, they don't believe in the system of justice, they don't believe in the way election results are conducted, they don't believe in the way Congress has oversight in the executive branch, all those things collapse, so they're undermining themselves. And the Republicans have got to reassert congressional authority over this White House, and I can't explain to you why they won't do it. The only thing that can happen is the American people figure it out, and they replace them.
I pray. Still ahead, it's day 12.